Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Tom Ray is here. And I know he's fun and jovial, but he's actually an expert at broadcast engineering. And Tom's going to answer about 10 questions for us. We're going to discuss some technical things, some legal things, some alternate broadcast inspection program things, ABIP. It's all coming up next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionics Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. By Nautel, worry-free transmission you can count on with outstanding control, reliability, efficiencies, and Nautel's unmatched 24/7 customer support. Online at nautel.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. Absolutely delighted to be here today. What a hot summer day it is across a lot of the U.S., including right here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm in the Telos Alliance studio, which is in my office, my basement office here in Nashville, Tennessee. Not quite a basement. I'm kind of underground, but there is a window out here, and I can look outside and see the beautiful trees and occasionally the deer when they walk by. So that's what it's like here. It's hot. It's hot across so much of the country right now. Not exact. It might be record breaking for a few locations, but there's been times that it's certainly been hotter, even in the last 15 years or so. All right. So that's my weather report. Let's bring in our super special guest, Tom Ray. Tom, welcome in. Good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you, Kirk. It's always good to be here.
Now,
and I figured I'd better wear the Radio Shack logo, seeing as you're going to have questions I can't answer. So hey,
you've got questions, we've got cell phones, or we've got batteries. Yeah. Okay. So this Radio Shaft, that's a little unkind, although not exactly, untruthful. Where'd you get this? Where'd you get this label?
I actually made it right before we went on the air.
Gosh. Well, there were, but back when I was doing contract engineering full time, there were plenty of stations that were on the air because there was a local Radio Shack store.
Oh, certainly. I miss them because, there are switches and capacitors and resistors. Boy, when you needed something real quick, that was a great place to go.
Yeah.
They apparently exist online now, but.
So you can get stuff, overnight from what? DigiKey, Mauser, apparently Radio Shack online. You can get something probably in a day or two or three, or Amazon. Amazon's been a great source of electronic stuff.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah. And there are others. I mean, there's some small mom and pop. Shane Toven's wife, Andrea, I don't know if she still does, but she ran a parts business for some years.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Smiling Dog Enterprises or something like that. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So Chris Tarr is probably not going to be on the show today. Chris is at the Wisconsin Broadcast Association Lollapalooza Engineers Party or something. He's having a big time, probably sucking down a margarita at a transmitter site. So he said he had to give a tour of a transmitter site along with Jeff Welton. So Chris Tarr and Jeff Welton are in the same room, and I'm sure Lollapalooza will ensue. So we're going to talk to Tom Ray. The reason I wanted to bring Tom in, and Tom was very gracious for doing this on short notice. I've had some technical questions that Tom has answered for me. And I realize that Tom is an ABIP inspector. He'll explain what that is coming up. And Tom, Tom usually knows the answer to questions and technical questions and sometimes operational questions because he's been involved with all aspects of broadcasting. He's a ham radio operator. And so I run across questions that people ask me. Station owners sometimes don't have a full-time engineer. They'll ask me a question. I've got a whole list of questions here, and we're also excited about taking questions from you, the audience. If you're watching our webcast live right now on Facebook or on YouTube. We're on YouTube live right now as we record this. at 5:06 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, June 23rd, 2022. If you're watching on one of those right now, you're welcome to type a question into the comment area. I'm watching on all the different places where we are broadcasting, and so I'll be able, hopefully, to catch your question, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook. We already have one comment. Robert Scheid says, hello from Lancaster, PA. Now, with that information out of the way, again, you're welcome to ask your questions, or if you want to wait and see what kind of questions I'm asking, maybe that'll prompt you to come up with a question. Something you've always wondered about. Hey, there's a decent chance that Tom Ray can answer it. Correctly or not, I don't know. Maybe correct answers cost extra. But Tom, before we get into your Q&A, I have a little announcement to make about Nautel. And Nautel, is one of our sponsors here on the show. They have taken a couple weeks off, but they're restarting their Transmission Talk Tuesday roundtable discussions in the month of July. They're going to have 3 of them in July. And if you go to their website at nautel.com/webinars and then go to Transmission Talk Tuesday, they've got roundtable discussions scheduled for July 12th, July 19th, and July 26th. These are all Tuesdays. That's why it's called Transmission Talk Tuesday. And they're at 12 noon Eastern Time. They don't have it ready to register just yet. We'll let you know. I'm going to guess next week. They're going to be ready for people to register on that the last week of June. They'll have their topics announced, but that is coming up, 3 of them in July. And you're going to want to be a part of that. Now, with the remaining time, I want to talk about Nautel's new VX series of FM transmitters. The industry's been waiting for a transmitter like this. It's got the famous Nautel reliability, and their engineers have worked super hard to make these transmitters serviceable. Because, that's one thing about hardware. No matter who makes it, hardware does break. That's a famous quote now from, I guess, different engineers, but one of them is my friend Greg Shea at Telos Alliance. Hardware breaks. It always does break at some point. Well, the Nautel VX series is designed to be easily serviceable. For example, you can replace the PA pallets with no soldering iron. They screw in, screw out, the connections screw down, and no soldering is required to replace the PA amplifier pallets. And the power supply, that is on a shelf that they slide in and slide out. And on transmitters that have more than one power supply, I believe they're hot swappable. So that's pretty cool. Also, the AUI, the Advanced User Interface, that's HTML5. No longer do you need to have Java running to make that work. It has instrumentation, RDS, and SNMP and presets. It has phone home for enhanced service. It can even call the Nautel factory and say, hey, my IPA module's not feeling so good. Shall we let the engineer know? So it's also, they have models that are certified for low power FM service. So they have the right spectral cleanliness on their output, even at low power levels. 4-year warranty. Holy cow. They start at 150 watts and they go up to 5 kilowatts. So check this out. I don't think they're shipping just yet. They're going to start shipping really quick, and you can get a quote. Maybe Jeff Welton is your salesperson. So Nautel.com. And this is the VX series. Of course, they have all their other transmitters, too. I've got a number of their other transmitters. Thanks, Nautel, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech, and we'll update people when the webinars are open for registration. All right, Tom, let's get into it. Are you ready to answer some questions, sir?
Of course. Always.
All right.
For you, anything.
Again, I've been collecting questions, and I need to check real quick, see if we have, okay. Martin Hill. Let's go ahead and prioritize the questions that come in from viewer listeners, viewer callers, viewer typers. Martin Hill asks, I've seen cellular antennas on AM towers. How are the cell antennas isolated from the hot AM tower? Assuming it's a hot AM tower, which most of them are. Tom, your comment on how you put other antennas, including cell antennas, on a hot AM tower.
Well, what you do is you have to isolate the base, obviously. And what they do is there's a device called an isocoupler. And what the isocoupler does is it allows whatever's connected to the isocoupler on either end, in this case, the cellular signal, to pass from, one cable to the next cable that goes up the tower. And it just keeps it away from the AM. There's no connection to the AM tower or the AM signal. And that's how they do it. I'm glad to hear that cellular companies are actually doing that, because that's a good source of revenue for AM stations. Um, when you do that, however, you do have to go back and if it's a non-directional tower, you need to remeasure the impedance, because there'll be extra capacitance from the cables on that tower, possibly a little bit of inductance from the cables coming off the tower. So you may have to adjust the tuning network. If it's directional, you're going to have to go out and not only make some adjustments, but you'll also probably, if it's a conventional proofed station, you're going to have to go out and run a proof. If it's a mom-proof station, well, you dial it back in, and everything should be good.
Let me dovetail some information onto what you said, just so we can make sure we're all on the same page. When you add antennas, whether they're an STL antenna, a two-way radio antenna, a Marti receive style antenna, or cellular antennas, the part that goes on the AM tower is going to be clamped to the AM tower. It's going to become one electrically with the AM tower itself. They won't be isolated off of the tower proper. But when they get to the base, you've got this insulated base on most, not all, but most AM towers. And so we've got to jump across that. We got to carry the cellular signal across that base without having any ground connection between, these cables coming down and the cables feeding them. And so you said, use the word isocoupler, isolation coupler, or isolating coupler. And this is a box that is essentially, it has two little antennas in it. Often they're little rings tuned to the right frequency, and they don't touch each other. And the grounding of the cables doesn't touch each other. So the outside of the cable that goes up the tower, it doesn't touch ground anywhere. It touches the tower, but that's not ground anymore, because it's an insulated tower. So these boxes, these ISO couplers, there's no electrical connection. There is a radio frequency connection, because two antennas are next to each other and coupled to each other. So the signals get back and forth. Even weak signals, even weak receive signals get across this just fine. But there's no, the outer conductors don't touch each other. The inner conductors of the coaxes don't touch each other. And this is I've got a lot of AM stations that have added an FM translator. I've got one of those myself in Greenville, Mississippi. We use an ISO coupler on the hot AM tower to get the FM power, onto the tower. I should mention, and Tom, I know that some towers are actually, some AM towers are grounded because they're skirt fed. Right. Can you tell us about that technique?
Well, the tower itself, you're right, is at ground. There's a skirt. It's usually 3 wires, and it's held off of the tower with insulators. Anywhere between 18 and 24 inches is pretty much the standard, but it could be more, could be less. It's called a folded unipole. And what you do is, around the top of the tower, you bond all 3 of the wires together, and then they come down the tower, and they circle the tower again and hook to the tuning unit, and that becomes your antenna. Keeps the tower at ground potential, so you can put stuff above that skirt, and it won't be a problem. But with the wires, of course, anything passing through there, once again, it's capacitance. It's you get some inductance, and you'll have to probably make an adjustment to the tuning unit. But typically, what they do is they adjust these so they're close to 50 ohms. So there's not much to the tuning network at the bottom of the tower, and they work fairly well. They work very well, as a matter of fact.
Good deal. All right. So a couple methods there. And some people who plan to put a number of antennas on a hot AM tower, they do the math and think, you know what? It'd be cheaper if we take this hot AM tower and ground it and add a folded unipole kit to it. And then we can add, all of the antennas we want to up to the structural limits of the tower, without buying an isocoupler for each one. We can just run the coaxes up the tower. Now, you still have to remeasure the tower and readjust the tuning, because the impedance is going to change with more stuff going up and down the tower. But some people have done that because they figured, hey, why buy all these isocouplers when we can make a folded unipole antenna out of this? Another possibility, and Tom, do you ever come across slant wire fed AM towers?
Actually, I built one back in December.
Really?
Yeah, it's it's in West Orange, New Jersey. the basic story is Family Radio is one of my clients, and they had a station transmitter site was in Queens, New York. Little like 5-acre plot of land that was just sitting there, and company came over and they wanted to buy the land, and they pulled out a massive check, and Family Radio said, well, this is kind of a no-brainer. But what they needed to do is they needed to get the station back on the air so they didn't lose the license. And they own a tower over in West Orange, New Jersey. So we put up a slant wire up to the top of the tower. It's interesting because the RF ground point is about 30 feet from the ground, because there's an FM transmission line that comes out of the building about 30 feet up and goes up the tower. So we had to keep the ground point around that, which was a lot easier than extending that transmission line. That would have been a nightmare. And we brought it down to a tuning box. I'm glad you're sitting down, because the impedance at the end of that wire is 731 ohms plus J950.
Wow. And if you don't know what that means this may be tough to tune. It's going to require some componentry.
Just a little. So I ran it through all the calculators I normally run these things through, and it was like, they were all like, "Are you kidding me?" So, well, the first thing is you got to get, let's get rid of the inductance. So I threw a nice big fat vacuum capacitor on there, and that got me into something that was, something that was easily workable. And then it became pretty much a T network, and I mean, it was easy to get it to 50J0 at the input. And don't ask me how. The first shot out, I ran the Smith chart on the thing, and it was the smile was in the right direction and perfectly symmetrical. And I'm looking at it going, seriously? I can't believe I did this. But right now they're running a kilowatt. I'm in the process of installing a Nautel 10 kilowatt, and I built the tuning network for about 20. So right now it looks a little bit ridiculous for a kilowatt. You've got these two big fat 35 kilovolt vacuum capacitors, and you've got a couple of 45 amp coils, but that's going to be required for the 10 kilowatts. So
yeah, sure. Might as well do that now. Okay. Well, good. Next, let's move on to the next question. I think we covered that pretty well. And we're going to take a break after we answer this question. Tom, my 950 megahertz STL radio system is getting old and flaky. Should I buy a new pair of radios or look at some of the new IP technology? And then I'll have a follow-up question to this. Old radio STLs, maybe you've got some, nothing, Mosley makes some good new stuff. Maybe you're still running an old Mosley 606 system or a 6000 system that's actually, my goodness, you look at the date and it turns out to be it's 22 years old.
Oh, exactly.
What do you think about 950 STL systems that are getting old and flaky?
I think 950 is still viable, but let's talk about the IP first. It depends on what you have available. If your IP connection is reliable, you'd probably want to take a look at many IP technologies. I mean, you've got Comrex, you've got Tie-Line, you've got Gates Air, you've got Telos, who all make codecs that'll work on this. You've also got the Ubiquity radios at 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz that can set up a link to the transmitter site. I like to see a 950 system be kept at a minimum as the backup. And I'll talk about, I've got a station in Hartford, WJMJ. It's the radio station of the Archdiocese of Hartford. And we're running a Mosley 950 STL. That's our primary. It's the big unit. It runs the main station. The WJMJ is run on the main channel on the STL in linear form, so it's digital going up to the site. Then I've got the HD2 and the HD3 running in digital also on that link. That particular radio also has a streaming component to it, so I've got streaming as backup, and I've got Comrex Bricklinks on a landline a cable modem, and they all work. And at various times, I mean, we took a lightning strike last year, which took out the 950 power amplifier, and we just switched over to the IP, and life was good. Like I said, it all depends. Up there, this particular transmitter site used to be a cable head end for Comcast, which is the provider in the area there. So, yeah, it could go down. Chances are, probably not. But it'd be very difficult at that site to put in one of the 5.8s. Now, there was a site I was at a couple of weeks ago. I did a due diligence, and I'm actually fixing some problems there. Um, they've got a 5.8 Ubiquity radio that's running to the transmitter site, that's running the HD1, HD2, and HD3 audio on codecs. And I mean, you can log into the transmitter, you can log into the remote control over that link, and it works very well. Even in snow, surprisingly, it's about an 8-mile link,
Hmm.
and it just stays up. So what the heck?
Interesting. Okay. And I would agree that the 950 megahertz range still quite viable, viable for analog STL left and right, like the old Marty style, like the Marty STL 10s or STL 8s. Well, those would be really old now. I wouldn't use those. And other composite 950 megahertz. Then it's also viable for digital transmission. Yeah. Harris, Gates Air makes some, and I'm sure there are others too that I'm just not thinking of right now. Um, uh, I got involved with helping a community station in Memphis with a problem. They had a double hop STL, and their STLs, the radios themselves, were really old and getting pretty flaky. And and it was a double hop. They had because from the studio they couldn't get all the way out to the transmitter side, so they had to hop it off a tall bank building in downtown
Oh,
Memphis. And the bank building says, we're adding a swimming pool to the top of our building. And so that was their
lovely.
antenna location was going to go away. And so we went to one of those Omnia MPX nodes, which uses the micro MPX technology. But the project took 2 years because there was no internet at the transmitter site, even though it was a cell site. There was no commercial. I mean, I imagine the cell companies had fiber coming in, but they were in charge of that, and it wasn't shareable. So it took them almost 2 years to get Comcast to put in business class internet to the transmitter building. Got that done. And so at the studio, they have Comcast, and at the transmitter site, they have Comcast, both in Memphis. So I felt pretty good about using that as a full-time STL, since the packets should never leave Memphis, right? They should be staying inside of Memphis. Wasn't able to do a trace
Exactly.
route yet on that, but anyway, so they went to IP, and they kind of planned that their 950 system is not going to be usable anymore, and they're not going to spend the money to rebuild it once the bank builds their swimming pool. So anyway, yeah, I wonder who the swimming pool's
And
for.
that's a perfect reason to use the IP. One of the it's not really an issue, but one of the issues I have right now is, for example, several of the automation companies are pushing, hey, let's put your automation system in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a client who's actually looking at automation right now, and a couple of the companies said, yeah, we'd like to see you put it in the cloud. And my first thing out of my mouth was, okay, what happens when the cloud goes away? You're off the air.
Well,
And
but that
the automation
but
company went, yeah, you know what, you're right.
well, it depends on what the automation company or the client buys in the cloud,
Right.
because
Well, that's
I
true.
mean,
That's true.
because part of, and I know all this costs extra money, so you can spend a lot of money. You can spend a lot of money on your own stuff that's not in the cloud too. You can put an automation at the transmitter site, which a couple of my
Mhm.
stations actually have the automation at the transmitter site because we don't have a morning show. So it's the easiest thing to do is put it at the transmitter site. We remote control. Transmitter's got great internet at the transmitter. It's at the head end of an ISP, so it's got great
There
internet.
you go.
Uh, uh, but in the cloud, you can pay for immediate instant failover to another container or virtual machine. It doesn't even have to be in the same data center. It could be half a country away, and it can take over like that. I don't know how they handle all the magic of the IP addresses, but there's obviously big corporations are doing this all the time.
Right.
And so now, but it's a worthwhile
Well,
concern, because if you're not paying for that backup, then yeah, you could be off.
yeah, well, the two markets here I'm talking about, one of the markets, they think AOL is the greatest thing next to sliced bread, and 56K modems are really fast. Um, and the other market, I mean, every time you sneeze, the internet goes out.
Oh
And
yeah.
one of the transmitter sites, I mean, internet, what's that? You go to the site, you've got power, you've got a telephone cable, I called the phone company to say, "Can I get DSL?" And they laughed at me. There's no cable up there. There's nothing
Yeah.
for internet at this site, and they have a couple of other sites that are the same. And it's nice putting things in the cloud. It's very handy, but if the cloud ain't there, what are you going to do?
And you're exactly right. And this is a lot of people's concern. I mean, and a lot of times we think that what happens to us or what's available to me is my worldview on how it must be. So
Correct.
One time I brought up the topic of cloud-based something or other at an SBE meeting here in Nashville. And oh my goodness, half the engineers were like, "That's a great idea." And half the engineers were like, "That'll never work." I'm thinking, well, your banking is in the cloud right now. Does your bank not work? But at their studio, their internet was terrible and they had no choices about it. Here at my house, I have two sources of fiber, one source of up to 2 gigabit cable and a couple of wireless options right here at my house. 4 miles down the road, there is a big FM tower transmitter site, and the best they can get there is DSL. And there's 4 radio stations there. You'd think that Comcast or somebody could run some fiber or cable up to that hill, but no. Which boggles my mind. They have at least 4 business class customers right there, and it's next to a wealthy subdivision. Why isn't there high speed internet available at the transmitter site? It makes no sense at all.
Here where I am.
Yeah,
I've got here at the house. I've got it's Time Warner. It's now Spectrum. And it works pretty well. It works very well. I do a national radio show out of the house, with Ron Anani and the Car Doctor every Saturday. And I sit here and run the board and run the automation. And he sits in New Jersey and talks. As a backup, I've got a DSL that's maybe 8 megabits coming in on a good day. And then I got cellular. And, but your point about, the banking's in the cloud. Okay, that's great. But when was the last time you needed your bank 24/7, 365? You don't need to go to that bank account constantly.
Sometimes I wake up at 2 a.m. and realize, I got to move some money from savings over to checking. And I'll do it at 2 a.m.
Oh, been there.
Hey, Tom, we got to take a quick break. We're here with Tom Ray, and I know we're taking too long to answer some questions here. We're going to have to buzz through some of these and get Tom's quick answer. We'll have a lightning round here at some point. This Week in Radio Tech, episode 599. Chris Tarr is somewhere at a transmitter site. I hope he joins us, makes a cameo appearance, but if he doesn't, it'll just be me. You got me and Tom. You can, if you're watching us live right now, you can go to our Facebook page and type in your question in the comments. I'm checking all the places on Facebook where we have it. We do have a few questions, including an interesting one that we'll get to. Also on YouTube, we're live on YouTube. Find us there. You can type a question in the comments there. We got a quick word here from Broadcast Bionics, and we'll be right back.
Welcome to the Bionics Studio. The Bionics Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These could be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionics Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionics Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
Broadcast Bionics at bionic.radio is one way to get them, or bionics.co.uk. Check them out at their website at bionics.co.uk. Thanks a lot to Broadcast Bionics for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And you can see they've got an amazing amount of stuff. And you, the engineer, we engineers, we can look really good going to our production, on-air staff and proposing some of these ideas for really improving, especially the social media content and making shows better. All right. Tom Ray is our guest. We're going to answer a bunch of questions. Tom, let me get one off the web here. Question has come in from Matt Bailey. Let me read the question and give us a quick answer. End-fed half-wave vertical antennas are popular right now among ham radio operators for HF transmission, often with only a minimal or no ground radials. Why aren't end-fed half-wave dipoles without the traditional 128 ground radials used for AM broadcasting? Is there something about that design that works for shortwave, but inherently doesn't work well for medium wave, such as the radiation pattern? Are they not used because of FCC regulations on AM antennas? Tom, what do you think about that?
The problem is the regulation, and it's not really a problem. When you add the ground radials and up to 120 of them, that stabilizes the antenna system and stabilizes the impedance. So it's not changing, typically with seasons and with rain and with snow, it'll stay pretty much within, constrained within a certain area or a certain set of parameters. And it also stabilizes your signal. So you know where the signal's going, you know that you've got the 120 radials, you know that you've got a good launching point for that signal. Where, when you have the half-wave end-fed antenna with no radials, it works. But it's not broadcast. It's not, broadcast is a little more precision than ham stuff. And I'm a ham. So, and I have no problem doing things like that. It's just that the FCC wants to see you have a good solid ground system and ground plane to launch that signal into the air. So you have an idea that if it's supposed to be non-directional, that it is actually a non-directional signal.
Gotcha. All right. Tom, I have a couple of tube amplifier transmitters. Let's assume FM is here. Haven't changed tubes in a while. Are rebuilt tubes still available? Are they expensive? Do they work well, or as well as I remember them working last time I had to replace them?
Well, yes. Matter of fact, I just bought a tube from a Conco. They're still in business. I believe Freeland is still in business. The issue nowadays, there's a couple of issues nowadays. First of all, the thoriated tungsten, which is what they make the filament out of, and what what generates the electron cloud in the tube, is not the same as it was many years ago. It's not the same quality because they're not making a lot of it. I mean, these tubes are still being used in medical applications and such, but boy, in broadcast, it's rough for me to walk into a station nowadays and find a tube transmitter because everything is solid state. So the other problem is they're not making these tubes in the quantity they used to, so the quality isn't. I'm not going to say the quality isn't there, but if there's something you haven't done in a while and you now have to do it, you've got to stop. You've got to think about it. You've got to take a look, maybe look back on your notes. And that's what's happening with the tube industry. I've got one right now in a transmitter, and I'm sure there's nothing wrong with the transmitter. I put it in 6 months ago. I have to change it already.
I've heard similar. And I've heard some engineers, and I don't have any direct experience changing tubes lately, but engineers have told me, hey, we used to get a good replacement tube the first try. Once in a while, we get one that wouldn't tune up right, and we'd have to send it off. And Econco or Freeland was good about swapping it back out for us. He said, one engineer told me I had to go through 7 tubes to find one that would
Wow.
work. He said they lost the magic. Now I don't, I don't know. And by the way, I think
I've
Freeland
seen
actually went out of business. I'm not finding them on the web
that.
anywhere.
Well, I've seen that. I mean, I had one transmitter. I got the tube and I put it in, and brought it up. It was it's 10 kilowatt transmitter running at 7. I brought it up to 3. It was great. I brought it up to 4. Tweaked the tuning. It was great. I brought it up to 5, and kabam! A couple of capacitors exploded.
Ooh, ooh.
I pulled the tube. It was a Conco. I mean, I've got a lot of respect for a Conco, and I've used a lot of their tubes over the years. And I called them and said, look, I need a tube. They sent me one overnight, put it in the next day. It was great. And the guy who actually rebuilt that tube called me because he was beside himself.
Mm-hmm.
There was a tiny pinhole in one of the seals. I mean, they missed it. It was microscopic. And that was just enough to cause a problem and let some air into the tube, and bang, it went. And but I've had other tubes. This particular transmitter I was talking about before, the last time I retubed it, that tube lasted 2 years. This time
Gotcha.
it was
Okay.
6 months. What are you going to do?
Here's a streaming question. Tom. Hey, Tom, this is Randy Radio here. Hey, people listen to my radio station stream online. They tell me the volume's going up and down a lot. What should I do, Tom?
You probably should be running audio processing on it. Just to even out the levels, at the very least an AGC to give you constant levels. You could use, there are products that Telos makes that would be excellent for that. You could use the Telos makes that an actual streaming appliance that would work very well. And I've got a station that uses that, and it sounds great because it has built-in processing. I've got a couple of stations running Stereo Tool on the computer and actually streaming through that, and that allows you. It gives you a whole bunch of other things. It gives you limiting. It gives you equalization. Gives you stereo enhancement if you want it. And basically, you just need to smooth it out. You need to come up with some form of audio processing, whether it's before the computer or whether it's actually on the computer with software. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is use limiting, not clipping, because with a codec, as soon as you start clipping, that starts generating all kinds of harmonics, and that's what we call grunge, and you don't want that.
One thing I've noticed, Tom, is that including the automation system that we use at my radio stations, we tend to use Playout 1 these days. A lot of these automation systems now have a built-in streaming module because they can charge a little extra for it. But typically, there's no audio processing on it, or it's just really basic and limited. Now, that may be good enough for you, but at my stations, a couple of my stations have an Omnia 7 FM processor, and I can, using the NF remote software, I can go in there and I can look at the audio coming in the back of the unit, right off the automation system, and I can look at the processed audio output. And what's coming in from the automation is surprisingly inconsistent, even though we have the same employee dubbing everything in. But we also get voice tracks from who knows where. We get the John Test show. We get out a Curly, Sam and Mo show. I don't know. And so your sources are going to be all different. And if you're just importing files that came in by FTP, those typically are not going to get processed as they come in. My point is, you got to use an audio processor. Same answer you just gave.
Even if you have the system normalizing everything when it comes in, all that's doing is it's basically taking the pot and adjusting it so you're not exceeding at the loudest point.
Right.
So it's not doing it. It's not doing anything. And if you think about putting a CD in a CD player, the levels are all over the place depending on what the song is.
On what the song is and the producer. And you're right about a lot of people think, well, they're all normalized. Normalizing isn't processing. Normalizing may get you in the ballpark, but there's things that can fool normalizing into actually making things worse. If there's a loud peak somewhere, everything gets pushed down the whole entire file. Okay, Tom, do I still have to check tower lights once a day? How are stations doing that with the new LED lighting systems?
Yes, you do still have to check the tower lights once a day, and that's a biggie with the FCC. And there are numerous ways to check them. One is good old eyeballs. If you happen to be at the station, you only have to check it once a day and take a look. Are they on? Are there any problems? And log it. Make sure you log it. Has to be logged. In the case of the LEDs, if you've rolled your own, the current draw on, for example, an LED beacon is a heck of a lot less than on a incandescent beacon. The incandescent beacon is around 10 amps. The typical LED beacon is maybe 1 amp, if that much.
Yeah.
So, what you would need to do is you need to come up with some type of a toroidal transformer and wrap the hot lead going up to the beacon through that, and then rectify it. And you would need to wrap that lead several times, because that will multiply the voltage, or the voltage you get from the current that's there. And then you can set up a comparator or a meter on your remote control or whatever it is you've been using. If you buy a complete system, they do come up with it comes with a controller, and they've got built-in alarms, which are great. It shows you if there's a bulb out. It shows you if the beacon's out. It shows you if the lights are on or off. Numerous ways, if you're on an AM, to get it across the base. There is somebody now, and I'm not sure of the company, but they do make a fiber way to jumper all that data across the base of the tower. You could hang a 5.8 gig radio on the tower and shoot the data back. You could put them through an isolation coil, which is basically a big fat coil that you see them oftentimes on sample systems if you use sample loops on a directional tower. And what it does is the top of the coil is at tower potential, and by the time you get to the bottom of the coil, that's at ground. And neither the twain shall meet, because you've got a big inductance there, which stops the RF from being short at the ground. And but there are numerous ways to do it. I usually recommend to people just go buy the whole system and buy the controller from the manufacturer, because they work well. They work very well. I've got several towers with them.
I was just looking up. I haven't found one rated for LEDs yet. Burke Technologies makes the tower light monitor, but it specifically says it's for incandescent lights. The one I'm looking at here says it's for incandescent.
If you take a look at various manufacturers, there's a company up in Syracuse, Unimar, UNIMAR. And they manufacture the controllers, and they manufacture the system. If you buy a system, you tell them how tall the tower is. It shows up with the wire. It shows up with everything. All you do, it's kind of like plug it in, make it work. And they stand by their product. You've got TWiRT lighting. You've got all the normal avenues to go through to get tower lighting, and they all make a controller, and they all make alarms. So
I'm glad you mentioned Unimar. They have a wide range of products for airport lighting and sensing that, and I guess for tower lighting as well. Here's if you have a wind turbine and LED lights on it, you can monitor those. All right, good deal.
And the people at Unimar, they're good people, and they stand behind the product. I had a situation where the system came in. It was going on a hot AM tower, and I told the tower guy, do not ground the fixture. Do not tie ground to the tower. Let it float. It's on a hot AM tower. And what do you think he did? He tied the wire in, and we applied power, and kabam. And I called Unimar, and I said, look, here's this problem. And I said, could you at least meet me halfway, and maybe could I buy a new beacon at cost? And they went, hang on a minute. And they put me on hold, and they came back. They said, you know what? Our instruction manual didn't say don't ground it. He says, that's our problem. Bring it back. We'll give you a new beacon under warranty. Wow. I'm like, excuse me? Who does that? Nobody does that. So, good people.
So we're talking to Tom Ray. Tom is the head of Tom Ray Consulting, and you can find him online at tomrayconsulting.com. And one of the things that Tom does, we're going to talk about it right after the break here. One of the things that Tom does is alternate, or what's ABIP stand for, Tom?
Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program.
Yeah. Yep. Basically what it is, Tom has a spray can of FCC away, and it protects you from getting a visit from the FCC. Isn't that right, Tom?
That's correct. They agree. If you pass the ABIP, they agree to stay away for 3 years.
Well,
unless there's a complaint. Unless there's a complaint against the station.
Unless there's a complaint, yeah.
Yep.
So only play good music, say nice things on the radio, and hire Tom to come inspect your radio station in certain states. But other states have ABIP programs too. Tom's going to explain how that works coming up soon. That's pretty good. Some stuff that keeps the FCC away for 3 years. My goodness, try finding some mosquito spray or tick spray that works that long. No, you won't find it. That's coming up. This Week in Radio Tech, our 599th episode with Tom Ray. I'm Kirk Harnack. Still waiting to see if Chris Tarr will check in with us. He may be too busy for a cameo appearance today. Our show is brought to you in part by my friends at Angry Audio. And Angry Audio, they got really smart. They noticed that Dan Braverman was closing up the Studio Hub, the radio systems company, and Studio Hub was going to go away. So Mike Dosh over at Angry Audio said, I'll take over that. I think that broadcasters should have Studio Hub. And so look what they're still making. They, on the same jigs that were invented to do this really well. What's amazing about Studio Hub, think about this. This is shielded twisted pair audio cable, and yet it goes into an RJ45 jack, and it does it right. It doesn't come apart. It's good, solid connections, and that took some machining to figure out the jigs to make that happen. So the Studio Hub brand stuff works well. Studio Hub Plus is actually the brand, and Angry Audio has it, and they still make the adapters that you love to build your studios with. Here's a female XLR to RJ45. And, these are for hooking traditional broadcast gear or professional audio gear up to things that use an RJ45 connector with a Studio Hub standard for either analog left and right audio or AES-EBU digital audio. That both standards work in the same cable. And so if you have an Axia X node, if you have WheatNet blades, if you have a Studio Hub audio console that has these connectors in them, these work great, and they make wiring your studio go super fast. There's other Studio Hub products that are really helpful. For example, let's say you've got a CD player or something with the consumer level outputs. Well, this is a really compact IHF to Pro audio interface, and it's powered over the same Studio Hub connector that brings the audio out of it, the balanced audio out of it. So it turns unbalanced into balanced, gets the level up to the proper +4 level, and powers it. So this is an awesome device. And maybe you've got you want to turn analog left and right audio into digital. Well, you can do that here with this. This converts it over to AES-EBU digital, or often called AES-3. This is the MJAD analog to digital converter. Plus, one more thing. These new headphone disconnectors are so cool because you've got talent that says, "Oh, I'm going to get up and go to the bathroom here during the break," and they get up and they rip the headphone out of the jack because they forgot they had the headphones on, or maybe around their neck. Well, it's kind of like a MagSafe connector, see? And it just pops apart right there. It just whoop, whoop, just pops right apart, and it goes back together just as easily, and it won't go together backwards. So you can't switch your left and right. It'll only go together correctly. So check that out. The headphone disconnector with 3.5 millimeter or with 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve connectors. Check it out from Angry Audio. Don't get mad, get angry at angryaudio.com. Thanks to Mike Dosh and Angry Audio for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Hey, Max Connect Wireless is another sponsor of the show. You know them because we've been talking about them for quite a while here. This is one of the 4G LTE modems, and John Takak is here to tell you more.
With all of the recent cybersecurity attacks against large corporations, we were looking for a product that would give us the ultimate security at our transmitter sites and as well as with our broadcast equipment. Max Connect fits the bill very well. Its greatest security feature is the fact that it gives you a single static IP address. Using this single static IP address allows us to close hundreds of open ports on our firewalls across the company and restrict access to only the Max Connect IPs. This has greatly reduced our exposure to the World Wide Web and made us much more secure moving forward. It's also given us the ability to expand as needed in a secure fashion.
Check out Max Connect Wireless. Here's the website. You can go to Max Connect. I know it's spelled funny. There's a link in the show notes, maxconnect.com, and check it out. If you need data somewhere, your transmitter site, remote broadcasts, especially from places where there's lots of people all updating their Facebooks and Instagrams, well, this will get your data through. We've used it here on the show when we need to. It does work. And talked to plenty of engineers at transmitter sites that use Max Connect Wireless. Thanks so much to Josh Bone for coming up with this idea, with this service for broadcasters, because it really works. Oh, and you get a fixed IP address, and that's really helpful. Really helpful. All right. We're here with Tom Ray. Tom, we got not a lot of time left. I was buzzed through more of these. ABIP, Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program. All right.
There you go.
What's the elevator speech? I'm a broadcast owner. I don't really want to see the FCC. I'd rather go about my business and try to run my radio station. What will ABIP do for me?
Well, ABIP will make sure that you're operating legally, and once you pass the program, the FCC agrees to stay out of your face for 3 years unless there's a reason. If there's a complaint against the station, they have to come in and to investigate. And typically, what we do is we come in. You need to arrange through your state broadcasters association the ABIP inspection. For example, don't call me and say, "Hey, come in and do the inspection." I can't give you a certificate if I'm not set up in that state. I could come through and just see if you're legal, but I can't give you the certificate. So you go through the Broadcasters Association. They contract me. They send me the contract that you've signed, and from that point on, you have 6 months to get the ABIP inspection done or correct problems. The nice thing is, if I come in and find something, you get a chance to fix it. If the commission comes in and finds something, you don't get that chance. They'll hand you a fine and say, "Here's your fine." So, first thing we do is we go through the public inspection file, and what I catch a lot of stations on that it's a minor thing, but a lot of people don't know this regulation exists. For a long time, you've had to have a link to your online public file on your station website. What a lot of people don't realize is you also need to have information on the site, name, email, and phone number of someone that can be contacted for assistance with the public file. Specifically, this is specifically aimed towards a disabled person, but it's for any assistance with the public file, and that has to be there. And most stations don't even know that regulation exists. But we go through the public file. Real simple. If you go to the FCC rules, 73.3526 for commercial stations and 27 for non-commercial stations, it tells you step by step what is required in the public file and how long it's supposed to be kept for and what you need. And then we look at things like, is the chief operator designated and posted? Do you have a local phone number from your community of license at the station? There's no more main studio rule, but you have to have a phone number that's toll free from the community of license.
So an 800 number will be a toll free number or
right. Yeah, toll free number or that area code and exchange. Then we look at your station logs. Station logs nowadays, that's your tower lights, that's your EAS. In certain instances with AMs, that is directional readings. That's if you have an unapproved sample system. We look through all this stuff. We take a look. I usually make sure that the EAS box actually exists, and that if you have people interacting with it, that they actually know how to interact with it, which is a big thing. It's one thing to get the EAS message, it's another thing to have the guy go, "I don't know what to do," to send that message. We take a look at numerous things around the facility just to make sure everything's on the up and up, and then we go to the transmitter and we take a look. We're really interested in, are you on power? Are you on frequency? How's your modulation look? In television, what's your power level? Is the antenna at the right height? Is your tower, does your tower match the ASR, the antenna structure registration? And I found a station once where I showed up and I'm looking at the ASR and I'm looking at the tower and I'm looking at the ASR and I'm looking at the tower, and I went, "Doesn't match." And the engineer went, "What do you mean doesn't match?" I said, "Doesn't match." I said, "According to the ASR, you've got a 351 foot tower. and you require a beacon and 2 levels of side lights. I said, you have a tower here that it's probably could be 350. I said, and you've got 1 beacon and 1 set of side lights. And he says, well, the tower's 330 feet. I says, well, okay, then there's a problem here. So thank God, and God bless him, he had the information in the building. This was a 30-year-old tower. It had been this way for 30 years. When they proposed the tower, it was going to be 351 feet, which required a beacon and 2 sets of side lights. And they took out the ASR, and that's what it was. And then for some reason, when they ordered the tower, they ordered it at 330, and it came with the lighting system for a 330-foot tower, and nobody caught it. So that was an easy phone call to a consultant I know, that one of the DC consultants, and I put them in touch with them, and they contacted the FAA, and 2 weeks later a brand new ASR showed up that was correct, and I could say, okay, we're done. For an AM station, we look at your directional parameters. If you're a mom proof or moment of methods, method of moments, proof, we look at the antenna monitor, and we're pretty much done if it agrees. If you're a standard proof station, we go out and measure your monitor points. If your FM's a directional, well, is the antenna kind of in the right kind of tell this? One thing a lot of people don't know, with an FM, television people know this, but with an FM, you are required to have a proof of performance on that transmitter for the FM transmitter. It's normally what came with the transmitter, unless you've made some major modifications or had major work done on it. AM, you've got to have the 73.44 measurements, which are otherwise known as NRSC measurements. With a television station, how's your power calibration? Hasn't been done recently, and for most stations that have been through repack, that's not a problem. And we literally go through basically from A to Z. And like I said, if we find there's a problem, you need to fix it. Went to a directional once. It was a 6-tower directional. You're going to love this, Kirk. 6-tower directional. Only 1 tower needed to be lit. As we're driving to the site, I'm looking at the top of the 6th tower, going, "What in the world is that?" The guy says, "Well, it's a rotating aircraft beacon." And I went,
"Oh, gee. Oh.
That's not what your ASR says. It has to be a flashing beacon." And he says, "Well, the airport up the street loves it." And I, well, it's nice what the airport loves, but the FAA is not going to love you. So they obviously had to change that. But we walked into the building, and both day and night pattern, the readings were so far out, it didn't make sense to even go out and try to measure the monitor points. I mean, we're talking 15, 20, 30% out in the ratios when you're allowed 5%. So they're working on that. To the chief engineer's defense, he was brand new, and this is what he inherited. So, but we found it, so he's working on it, and hopefully he'll be done shortly. And we look at, and also we look at tower paint, which is part of your ASR. Your tower, if your tower is required to be painted, it has to be aviation orange and white, not pink and rust, which is what a lot of stations are.
Not colors that are part of the Martha Stewart collection at
exactly.
Yes.
And a lot of stations also make the mistake with a tower. They'll put up strobe lights, and typically when you put up strobes, daytime strobes, you don't have to paint the tower. And they think, actually upper management thinks, well, we're done. We don't have to paint the tower ever again. Well, that's kind of like saying, okay, I've got my house here and I'm never going to put a coat of paint on it. And then you wonder why the siding rots off and you get a hole in the side of your house. Same with the tower. If you don't maintain the tower, scrape it, regalvanize it, whatever you have to do, it's going to cause a problem. So, we take a look at all that, and we help you out. The nice thing is, if you need help, you ask, and I can provide advice.
Well, the good news about it, if you put daytime strobes on and you don't have to paint the tower orange and white anymore, you can paint it a Martha Stewart color.
Oh, yes. I went to a college station, about a year ago. I did an evaluation, and I looked at the tower. I hadn't looked at the ASR yet. I looked at the tower, and the tower was creamsicle orange and white, and I'm like, oh, my God. And I looked at the ASR, and it didn't need painting. Like, okay, you could paint it pink with purple polka dots. It doesn't matter.
Oh, my goodness. Tom, we've got less than 10 minutes left, and we have one more quick commercial break to do. Okay. I want one of my questions is going to be, I'd like as complete an answer as you can, maybe before the break, maybe after. I'm really thinking of turning one of my AM stations off and handing the license in. Can someone else apply for it and then be a competitor to me? What factors would help me decide whether to keep it going or turn it off? And if you want to give me a 2-minute answer right now, that'd be great.
Okay, we can do that. If you're going to turn it off and you're going to turn the license in, well, that creates a space. And yes, somebody could apply for it, but there has to be an open window at the FCC, and they're not taking AM applications at the moment. But if they opened a window, yes, somebody could walk in and apply for that, and now you possibly have another competitor. It's basically a business decision. I mean, let's take a look at the AM. What's it do? I mean, does it have an audience, and does it actually make any money? There's an awful lot of AMs that just, especially if it's a small AM, it just doesn't make any money. If it has a translator attached to it, you're going to have to keep that AM on the air because the translator and the AM are married. If the AM goes away, the translator goes away. So you need to keep that in mind. But it's really a business decision. If it's costing you money to run the station, and there's no positive return, and it's always negative cash flow, unless the rest of the company can support it, well, maybe it's time to turn that license in instead of letting it just sit there and rot, you know?
It may be a small consolation, but if you can't make money with it, well, there's a decent chance that neither could a competitor. And Tom, I thought that if you deleted a license, maybe interference levels rules have changed such that, okay, you can run this station, but if you turn the license in, even if there is a window, you may not be able to put it back on the air because interference standards have changed. Is there any truth to that? You know?
Yeah, there is, and that depends on the station. That depends on the area. That depends on what the interference levels are at that area. So it's a case by case basis with that. But somebody could apply for even if it just came back on at 100 watts. Yeah, that's still a competitor. So
yeah. Well. Yeah. If you tried and did the right things and couldn't make money, well, probably neither could a competitor. But and then some people,
something else to consider her is that if you have that license and you're thinking about turning it in, maybe there's a nice church or maybe there's a nonprofit in the area that might make use of it, and you could make a donation and get a nice tax write-off.
Well, now that's a good point, and maybe you could get an FM translator for it, either for your own use or donate it to another organization. That's not going to compete with you formatically or for dollars, and right. They could get a translator. So those are possibilities as well. All right, we're going to have a time for a tip when we come back. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcasters General Store and VoxPro. We'll be right back.
Hey, what's happening? St. John here, coming to you from Command Central, and wanted to tell you about the absolute best partner you can have in radio. I'm talking about, boom, Wheatstone's VoxPro. Lots of different audio software out there. Why VoxPro? It's the only software designed to do what we needed to do, which is record, edit, playback in real time. When I say lightning fast, I'm going to show you how fast you can edit stuff up in VoxPro right now. So literally 3 clicks on the controller, mark left, mark right, everything that gets marked, you hit delete, it goes away. It's literally that fast. So we're going to take this part right here.
Caller 9.
Boom. From caller 9 to him saying, I'm ready.
5. Ready for that secret sound.
Boom. All of that stuff, hit delete, it goes away. Here's your edit.
You are tackling secret sound, caller 9. I'm ready, St. John.
So one of the best features of version 7, this is awesome. It's effects macros, and you can literally put a chain of effects together so that instead of having to normalize a phone bit and then use noise reduction on it and EQ it and all that, you can literally build a chain. One button, this one's called call right here. I just click that. All of those processes happen instantaneously. Final thing that I love about VoxPro, and there's so much more to get into, but one of my favorite things, you can load it on a laptop. I've literally done my show from a hotel room in Armenia to the conference room at, this was fun, jury duty. Great thing, no one could tell the difference. VoxPro makes it totally easy. Telling you, if you're looking for the best on-air partner, call my friends at Wheatstone, ask them about VoxPro, and you will be glad you did.
And the place to buy that would be from Broadcasters General Store. You can find them on the web at bgs.cc. They got a brand new website. Look, it's all updated. They got lots of cool pictures there. Or you can call them like I do, because they're nice people who answer the phone. And their number is 352-622-7700. You know, I've been calling that number for over 30 years now. 352-622-7700. Thanks a lot for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Tom, it's time for a tip or a question. Which would you prefer? Give us a tip or answer one more question?
Give me a question.
All right, questions. It's about due diligence. So let's talk about due diligence, as a few stations are indeed selling here and there. What are you finding when you're asked to do due diligence? What are some of the kooky things you're finding these days that the buyer needs to be aware of?
Well, I did one last month. And in this particular station, there were some issues that the owner really wasn't being upfront about, and tried to kind of pull the wool over my eyes. And it was like, he actually quoted somebody from a very large consulting firm that I've known the principal of the firm for 40 years. And I looked at him. I said, first of all, I've known the head of the firm for 40 years, and second of all, nobody in his organization would have said something this irresponsible. So needless to say, I wasn't the former owner's best friend after that. But you know, typically what you find is you'll find I don't want to say, you know, there's a lot of stuff you'll find that you wouldn't do yourself, and that's okay. But you are entitled to a fully working radio station, a fully functioning radio station, and you know, if it's up to the new buyer or the buyer, and up to the seller to negotiate, well, what's going to happen? We find this problem. We found in this case, we found a hot spot on a transmission line. And the station needed filtering, which was on site, but it wasn't in line. And that's most likely what caused the hot spot. And, it was like, okay, so who's going to fix this? What ended up happening in this case is they put some money into escrow, and I'm going in to fix it. So it's a relatively easy fix. You know, replace a small section of transmission line, which actually, thankfully, the hot spot's in the building, and we're done. And put the filters in line, and we should be good. But you tend to find sometimes you find things neglected, and very often it's something that maybe the current owner really wasn't aware of, or really, he'd never gone out to the tower or the transmitter site and looked around, and you're finding something, whether it's excessive rust, whether it's a lightning ball missing at the bottom of an AM tower, whether it's a kink in a transmission line. He may not be aware that this is a problem. So this is what we look for, and we want to make sure it's functioning, and we want to make sure it's actually working, and then fix it. In the most expedient way and the most cost-effective way possible, because you're not there to gouge the former owner. You're there to fix the problem.
Speaking of problems, Tom, in many states, if you are selling a house, you're required to disclose certain things, like is there black mold, or is the house haunted? I'm wondering, in some states, if you sell a radio station and the studio is haunted, are you required to disclose this? Because I ask because I worked at a radio station in Memphis one time where it was reported that there had been ghost of Elvis sightings in the building.
Oh my. Did he have a peanut butter and nana sandwich?
So have you ever, I realize that radio station sales typically happen without a realtor involved, and perhaps maybe, I don't know if what laws apply in terms of disclosures. Any ideas?
That's a good question, but it's a broadcast station purchase is actually it's a dual purchase. You're purchasing the license, but you're also purchasing the property. And if you're purchasing the property, I would think real estate law takes precedence in that case. So if it's haunted, and Elvis is going to be coming in and singing "Love Me Tender" when you don't want him to, at 2 a.m.
Tim,
you probably should tell the guy.
Tim Braddock just messaged me, and he says WTHT in Newark was in a haunted house. So I bet there's a story there. We got to go, Tom. We got to go. Okay. Thank you for providing us with a lot of expert answers here. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise. Thank you.
My pleasure, Kirk, and thanks for inviting me. Anytime.
All right. Good to see you. Thanks a lot to Suncast, our producer for this and every show. Does a great job. Thanks to Chris Tarr. He's out giving a transmitter site tour with Jeff Weldon to the WBA Engineers Lollapalooza party, or whatever it is that they're doing there in Madison, or wherever they are. And so we hope he'll be back next week. Next week, we got a great show about streaming and some of the cool updates and things that are happening in streaming with some really smart people. We're going to have them on the show next week, and more good shows all scheduled for July. Thanks to Andrew Zarian, too, the founder of the GFQ Network. We'll see you next week. Tell your friends, please. Thanks for your questions in the live show. Appreciate it. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.